Pulse, co-hosted by me, Bryce Simon of Motor City Hoops, a former D1 Hooper and current teacher, husband, and father of 3 amazing kids.
And I'm Omari Sankofa the second, Pistons beat writer for the Detroit Free Press.
And unfortunately, we are not joined by Wes Davenport, whose refrigerator broke down sometime today, and he had to go buy a new one before all of his stuff was bad and not able to be used anymore. But we are joined. This was super awkward for me doing the intro because I'm so used to my guy, Sam Vecenie, doing the intro over on his podcast, the Game Theory Podcast. He podcasts every once in a while. Sometimes I talk hoops with him. Sam Vecenie from the Game Theory Podcast, from The Athletic, NBA Draft Guru, NBA Guru, Film Breakdown Guru from Australia. Sam, what's up, my guy?
What's going on, Bryce? It's good to see you for the first time in 20 hours since the last time we did this. Omari, it's good to see you as well. You know, I'm excited that you've had a lot of success over at the Free Press. It's great.
Oh, I really appreciate that. I mean, I always, of course, follow your work at The Athletic, as I'm sure, most sports writers do. For those who don't know, I did start off at The Athletic covering the Grizzlies before I got back home 4 years ago and was able to beat Sam then. So it's great to sort of have this combination of forces, Bryce now being our mutual link.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about this earlier today where like you and Omari are so different, Sam, and then me and Omari and me and you are so like just the difference of all of us, because you and I were talking about this the other day. I sent you the video of me doing cattle work and you're like, Bryce, we have completely different lives. And I'm like, me and Omari have the same thing, completely different lives. So like all three of us just completely different, but we all meet here with hoops.
Well, it's so funny. Like I said this to you last night on the podcast, like you brought up that, Allen Iverson was like your favorite player growing up. I was just like, isn't that like just the best sign of basketball bringing everybody together, that this kid who grew up in Kansas doing all this Yellowstone stuff, like on his ranch and stuff, like ended up becoming such a fan of Allen Iverson, who grew up like in a really tough spot in Virginia and like had all of these difficult times and everything. So it just is such an indication of the way that basketball is so uniting and like brings everybody together. I love it.
No doubt. I was gonna say, I thought I was really gonna be the odd man out on this one because like we were talking about Bryson Tiller on Twitter earlier, who is, for those who don't know, he's a singer around my age. I'm 29. But then you mentioned, but Wes is going to be on my side. But then before the pod started, you told me that Wes is having refrigerator issues, and he is also married. He's having fridge issues. Like I have none of these problems in my life, so I just don't know what the commonality is. Like I pay rent, I'm not married. Like I turned 30 in like next month, so you would think I'd be gonna have those adult problems, but that hasn't happened to me yet. So I don't know.
Yeah, like it's funny. I live like in the middle intersection of you two because like been married for coming up on 5 years this year, but don't have kids. Generally live a life that is a little bit more free than when you have kids. So I can understand, where you're coming from, Omari, and, Bryce, the kids are real.
Royce has never shown up on the Game Theory, but Omari will tell you the youngest one makes an appearance every third or fourth episode on the Pistons Pulse, because I record in his room. With all due respect, like that's his plane right up there on the wall, so his bed is right here. Like I mean, at the end of the day, he should be able to come in whenever he wants because this is his bedroom. But
we should get Royce on the pod. I feel like I may have more in common with Royce than with you, Bryce. So
yeah,
not impossible.
I'm just glad Sam didn't know who Bryson Tiller was. And so so Amari's talking about random musicians and stuff. He has awful taste in food. Sam just watches movies all day long somehow while talking on the phone and watching NBA draft and NBA. And I'm sitting here not understanding what either of you are talking about. I don't understand any of it.
Yeah, like right now, this is what I've got, like in terms of movies. Yeah, that's my recent purchases in terms of Blu-rays and stuff that I'll get through in the next, I don't know, probably month, I would say.
Something like a home movie setup.
Omari, did you know that some Blu-rays don't work in Australia? They're only work in America. This is something I learned on the Game. Exact.
They're regions. So for Blu-rays, they're in order to make as much money as possible for these companies, there's like region A, which is United States and North America and stuff, and then region B, which is Europe, and then region C, I think, is like the Pacific Islands and Asia and Australia and stuff like that. So you have to buy an all region Blu-ray player in order to be able to play all of them. I made sure and made that purchase.
That's really discriminatory. That's shocking. I never thought about Australian Blu-rays before today. So you obviously learn new things.
Yeah, like if you would buy a Blu-ray from Australia, it would not play in a machine in the United States. If you would buy a 4K disc, it would, because those are region agnostic. But yeah, this is where I'm at in my life.
This is it's amazing. So we got to talk Detroit Pistons. If you guys have left a rating or review recently, I have it. We're gonna shout you out on the next pod. But since we have Sam here and his time is precious and our time is precious, we are gonna wait till the next one. So we always thank you guys, ratings, reviews. If you're watching live on YouTube, hit the like, subscribe, all of that stuff. And if you're not listening to the Game Theory podcast, go ahead and find that on YouTube as well. Sam, we're going to work in chronological order here. Also, if you're watching live, drop questions in the chat. We'll try to get to those in segment 3. I know you guys are juiced about Sam being here and you want to ask him stuff, and we want to allow you guys to do that also. Let's start back at the beginning, Sam. Pistons go through the offseason. They draft Assar Thompson. They don't really spend their money on anything crazy. Boyan's back. Burks is back. They trade for Monty Morris, the same contract of Joe Harris. Cade's coming back healthy. Jalen off their rookie years. Assar Thompson, Marcus Sasser. Just where were you at coming into the season in terms of expectation, kind of what you thought the roster might be?
Yeah, so kind of twofold. So in terms of the decisions they made last offseason, outside of just like not paying the money, you know what I mean? And like not expending a bunch of money on free agents that probably wouldn't have helped them, given that it seemed like, you know, Fred VanVleet was going to Houston the whole time, et cetera, right? I think that was okay, but I probably disagreed with everything else that they did. I thought they should have moved Bojan Bogdanovic last trade deadline, let alone last summer, you know, let alone the trade deadline before that one, right? Or whenever, like basically whenever they got him, I was like, okay, this is just this is a ticking time bomb. They should be moving this guy. He's a little bit older, right? You're not going to get commensurate value for him. I actually think they did okay at the deadline for what they ended up with, but we'll see how Quentin Grimes goes. The Assar Thompson pick, not the pick I would have made. I've talked about that at length with Bryce before.
We are a Cam Whitmore friendly podcast here, Sam. Yeah. So
we were so big on Cam.
Yeah, it's just to me like, and this will be a running theme of what we talk about, especially when we get to the draft. I just really disagree with the idea of surrounding Cade Cunningham with non-shooters.
Yeah. And
that's what they've done kind of at every step of the way. And that's what, from an overarching team building perspective, bothers me most about Detroit. The Monty Williams hiring was probably the biggest piece though. And I think that was one that I probably was wrong on, like point blank. I thought it was a good hire at the time. I thought, you know, this is a guy that helped build up that Phoenix Suns roster in a real way and helped Devin Booker reach his ceiling and, you know, got DeAndre Ayton to the point where he was a valuable player at the very least. It did seem to end not ideally, maybe with DeAndre in Phoenix with Monty, but he got him to that point. He developed him. And I thought that the development aspect of Monty Williams would be a really beneficial piece of it. And then fast forward to, you know, what I thought coming into the year, I thought that they would look a little bit more cohesive. I thought that they would look a little bit more together. I remember James Edwards and I like did win total over unders for like that, you know, middle section of teams. And we had the Pistons in there and I felt like pretty okay about them. Like I thought that they would maybe, I didn't think they were a playoff team. I thought they'd win 30 to 35 games, something like that, like maybe take a leap. And what I like really underestimated was the level to which their youth would cause problems on defense. And I think that that's like a whole other thing that we'll get into in a minute. But like B, I thought that their offense would just look way more cohesive and like there was a plan. than it did. I thought the rotations would be better. There were just so many, all bench lineups, and we'll talk about that, I'm sure at some point. But I think that I expected a bigger leap than what we saw this year, and unfortunately, we did not get that. And I think that's a case where I will say I was wrong about the way the Pistons season was going to go.
Sam, obviously the wheels not only fell off early, but probably to a greater extent than anybody could have predicted. You were probably one of, if not the first national voices who sort of spoke out with what was happening as far as Monty and the rotations. Like, it was a frustration for Pistons fans really since preseason when Jaden Ivey was coming off of the bench. And I think back then it's kind of tough to predict how much of that carries over into the season. But for you, I guess, when did that really start to stand out to you? And was it just the Jaden Ivey usage?
Game one
with that
preseason, like when you're prioritizing Killian, we have too much evidence that Killian Hayes can't play basketball at an NBA level. I apologize to him. I wish him the best. Like, everything I've been told, he's a really good dude who works at his game and everything. It's just that unfortunately he can't offense at an NBA level, kind of across the board. He can pass, but he can't really handle the ball at a high enough level. He can't shoot it at a high enough level. There just isn't enough creative ability or shooting ability to keep him on the court offensively at this point in his career. To prioritize that over Jaden Ivey, who's a guy that you just invested a top 5 draft pick in, who had a rookie season that I thought obviously was up and down, but largely ended on a positive note, where I thought he looked really good near the end of the year. And look, March basketball, April basketball is not real, right? We can all admit that. But I would have thought that would have allowed him to springboard into, if you weren't going to bring anybody else in a starting position, and certainly playing over Killian Hayes, right? Maybe it was some weird accountability thing where Monty just really wanted him to defend. There were obviously a lot of quotes about that in the press. Maybe it was, thinking it was a better fit with Killian, having a better passer out there with Cade. I don't really agree with that, but whatever. I don't know what the idea was, but that was the first moment where I was like, this is completely bonkers and it does not line up to me. All of the all bench lineups when you don't have a relatively deep team, that was a mess. The rotations in general did not line up for me. And it was very easy to see early on that this group was not being maximized.
Let's talk about the young guys. And I want to ask you about Cade at some point, but I think for the most part, people's thoughts on Cade are pretty similar, the same. I want to talk about Jaden Ivey and Jalen Duren, because even Assar, it was his rookie year. Keaton Arnold says, do you want to trade the young core for win now players? Mr. Jones says, although the defense wasn't expected to be good from Duren and Ivey, do you agree that they were so much worse than expected that it's okay to move on from them for pieces that complement Cade better? So I want to use those two comments / questions from our listeners to just ask you your thoughts on Jaden Ivey season, Jalen Duren season, and where this thing goes from there. Let's just assume, Sam, that Cade is the guy the organization is going to build around moving forward.
Yeah. So let's start with, I think Ivey is the better prospect. I think he's a more important prospect for the Pistons than Duren. But in terms of wins and losses and impacting that, bottom line, having a competent defensive center is probably just more important, right? In terms of racking regular season wins and losses. And I mean, Bryce, you and I have talked about this for years upon years now. I have never been the biggest Jalen Duren fan in terms of his instincts defensively around the rim. I know people say he's switchable. I don't see it as much as other people do. I think that you can have him on an island in a pinch and it's okay, but I don't think that it's a strategy that will work time and again. Right. So what my issue is, okay, he's not switchable. He's shown like no instinct really in drop yet, right? Like gets caught in no man's land all the time. There's been no real development in terms of like his ability to play cat and mouse between the ball handler and the big. He's not a particularly great rim protector at this stage. He's a great rebounder who ends defensive possessions, that I do think that has some value. But at the end of the day, I just, if I am them and I see the best offenses around the league, I see Kristaps Porzingis at the center position. I see Miles Turner at the center position. I see
Chet
Holmgren at the center position.
Jaren.
I see, Jaren Jackson. I see Nikola Jokic, certainly. And, that's a totally different beast. But like I think it's like 6 of the top 7 offenses this year have a big that like shoots, right? And it's hard to find a single player who can shoot and who can defend at an NBA level, right? Who is 7 foot tall. Those guys are way harder to find than what people think, which is why like Kyle Filipowski like can't defend, but it's just really hard to find 7-footers who can dribble, pass, shoot. And that's why I like, Kyle Filipowski maybe a little bit more than other people do. Having that guy is just valuable at the end of the day. Now, having somebody who can do what he does offensively and also defend is a totally different beast. And it's why those guys like Chet, even like Turner to an extent, who isn't like a great ball handler, but has improved in that respect in terms of his perimeter play over the years. They're just like kind of invaluable in terms of being able to space the floor on offense and having like impact on both ends of the court. And it's just, I don't see Jalen Duren ever getting to that level as a shooter, which to me, I'm not saying he can't be a starting center because again, there are only a limited number of guys that I just said that can dribble, pass, shoot at the center position. But I don't think it makes him non-expendable either if the right thing comes along. And with Jaden Ivey, who is the second guy you mentioned, I just think that guard defense is a little bit more important than defense from bigs. I would like to have a good guard defender, a good wing defender next to Cade Cunningham. I also think that Jaden has shown some flashes over his years where he's certainly athletic enough. I think that the burden in terms of like instincts is just like a little bit lower on guards in general. Like he can chase around shooters in some respect, right? He can hopefully sit down and guard on the ball at some point because his athletic tools indicate that that should be a skill set that he has. Offensively, Bryce, you and I have talked about it a lot. We like the idea of a slasher, playmaker, transition, up-tempo threat next to Cade Cunningham offensively, right? I agree with Luis, who says, it's rare to find a guy with the speed of Ivy. Completely agree. His tools are just different in that respect. I don't know that Jaden Ivey would be like non-expendable to me or like untradeable, but I would value him more, I guess, than I would Jalen Duren at this point. And, I know that Jalen Duren, I actually don't know if I would ask around the league who I would get better feedback on, Ivy or Duren. I haven't done that in a while. Yeah, maybe I'll do that at some point. Maybe I'll ask like, who do you think has more value, Ivy or Duren? Because that is interesting. But yeah, I'm not totally sure the way that the actual NBA people would think about that conversation.
No doubt. Sam, when it comes to Duren, and as a whole, the Pistons are approaching this weird stage where you have to commit money to Cade and you're a year off from Ivy and Duren being eligible, but you still don't really know where you are at this point in the rebuild. But, I think most people would agree you just can't win in today's NBA with a center that can't really defend or stretch the floor. I think you need at least, ideally both, but, with Duren being 20 years old, do you see a path for him to become a plus on defense, considering where he is now? Because even though bigs obviously have a lot to learn coming in, you also do see bigs like Derek Lively come in as rookies and make an impact on that end pretty much from the jump as well.
Yeah, it's hard because I think that the instincts are not great. he has this thing where like I think that he kind of like he doesn't get the most out of his lateral ability. I feel like when he's in ball screens, particularly like Brendan in the YouTube brings up how much of them are effort related, how much of it is like skill, basketball IQ. I kind of think it's like all interconnected a little bit. Like I don't want to say he doesn't play hard because I don't think that's true about Jalen Duren at all. I think it's that he's processing things, and at times because he's processing things, it might look a little bit slower, maybe. And like maybe he feels like he can't be as disruptive using his length because he's processing things in the way that he did. So like, I don't know that I would say it's like, I don't think it'd be fair to say like effort for Jalen Duren. Like Jalen Duren like attacks the glass hard. He does certain things like with very real effort. I think to me, it looks like with him, the gears are turning a lot, and like he doesn't really disrupt anything because of that, because he's trying to almost like figure out what to do. And to answer the question of like, can that be improved? Like DeAndre Ayton had some of those things happening. DeAndre was I thought a more impactful player entering the NBA defensively, despite like what the narrative was. Like I saw a lot of people say they thought he was terrible on defense, but he was like all Pac-12 defensively, and Jalen Duren I think was like all AAC defensively his year at Memphis too. But like I felt like DeAndre was like a little bit better, I guess, at the level and like being able to defend on the perimeter. It was just like his rotations around the rim were a little bit slower, and Jalen has a little bit of that too. But like I think he has like all of it, whereas DeAndre had like some of the perimeter ability, I guess I would say. And it can be improved. I just don't know if it'll get to a level where it's like, this guy's, an all defense guy. This guy is a, well above average starting center defensively. Like Nick Claxton is a good example of this. Like Nick entered the NBA with like very real defensive instincts and like knew how to be disruptive. A lot of the best players in the league defensively, they entered the league with that, not a situation where they developed it while they were in the league.
All right, we're going to go to short break. Amari, when we come back, I've had some requests here in the comments. They want to hear what Sam thinks about Cade. So when we come back from the break, let's get Sam's thoughts on Cade Cunningham, and then we'll start moving forward into the offseason decisions that are going to be made there. But when we come back, let's talk about the face of the franchise, Cade Cunningham.
All right, we are back with segment 2. Sam, if there's any positive from this past season, it's just that Cade came back from shin surgery and pretty much improved his game all around. He got up to 22, 23 points on pretty solid efficiency. Back half of the season, he shot around 37, 38% from three, which obviously was one of his big swing skills. I remember you being pretty high on Cade coming in. I remember you being wowed by him when he took over that Miami game late. Just overall, did you see enough from Cade this season to just buy into him being maybe not, a top 10 guy, but a guy who can absolutely lead your team going forward?
Yeah, look, I think Cade is going to be an all-star. I have no real concerns about that. I wonder what the upside is. Like, can he be a top 10 guy? Can he be is he more of a top 20 guy long-term? Those margins really matter when you start trying to find like that number one option. And I think that is where it'll be interesting to track Cade. Maybe is like the easiest way, but like in terms of him being an all-star, like I have no concerns whatsoever. For him to have the season he did, surrounded by lineups with no floor spacing, no shooting, like not a ton of like rim pressure around him. And that's a genuine weakness of Cade's in and of himself, is like, he's not a guy that's going to put like a crazy amount of pressure on the rim, but he's so effective in terms of his processing of the game. He's so effective in terms of his, just overall skill level and processing ability, the way he thinks through things, the way he thinks through ball screen reads, the way he thinks through basically everything he kind of does on the court. I think if you gave him shooters, the world would open up for him as a basketball player. like I don't think he got compared to Luka a decent amount coming in, and I don't think he's that. I think that the thing with Luka that people underestimate is just how freaking big Luka is. Luka is 6'8", 6'9", and like broad, so it's just really easy for him
Like
to
a
like
tight
use
end.
his body. Yeah, 100%. But I think he can potentially be like that next level down. I would say, like that. I'm gonna say this name, and people are gonna lose their damn minds and everything. But like, he's very different than Jalen Brunson, but I can see them winning in similar ways.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where they use their body really well, they use their footwork really well, they use different things around the basket. You know, Cade doesn't necessarily have to get to the level Jalen did with his footwork, right? Because Jalen is 6'2", really broad shouldered and everything, but you know, Cade is 6'6" with a 7-foot wingspan and like just has a little bit more margin for error, right? I think that Cade can win in similar ways in terms of like getting into the paint and using his body to finish, even if it'll look slightly differently than, you know, Brunson. You know what? Do you guys understand what I'm saying?
No, absolutely.
No, I think it makes sense. I think what this leads to though is, and tell me if you would disagree, I think Cade is very much going to be a heliocentric player. The two names we've talked about, Luka, very heliocentric. Jalen Brunson took more dribbles than anybody in the NBA this year. I thought maybe Cade had a little bit more on and off ball when he came into the league. Having watched him now through 3 years, my vibe is that's the way he wants to play. Would you agree? And do you think he's going to be good enough? Or would you like to see him play a little bit more off ball where put the ball in Jaden's hands, or it could be someone other than Jaden Ivey?
I think he would be willing to play on the ball, like or off the ball. Like I don't like, he seems to me like anytime, and I've talked to him a couple of times, like not nearly as much as Omari has, but like, you know, I'm not going to sit here and tell you like I'm an expert on Cade Cunningham at all. My impression talking to him has always been that he wants to win, and whatever that looks like, he'll be good with it. I do think his skill set best fits right now as more of a heliocentric player.
Sure.
And if I was a Pistons front office member, I would be building around that in some way, shape, or form. But I do like, I don't think it's a situation where it's like, oh no, like he wants to play like this certain way and like he won't play another way. I think that he would. I just think it behooves the Pistons to lean into what makes him as good as he is.
Real quick follow-up, Omari, from Koo, who Omari and I will be joining Locked On Pistons on Wednesday, so make sure you guys tune in for that one. Koo says, do you believe, Sam, that Cade can flourish with both Assar and Duren on the floor? So this can be kind of a more broad question with the floor spacing too.
Yeah, this is why I didn't like the Assar pick last year. And I was pretty clear about that to start the season. This is the one thing that I feel like I got right about the Pistons coming into the year is I do not think that the way that they've built their core makes sense, really. You have Ivy, who is a guy that like has made catch and shoot shots throughout the course of his career, but he doesn't get guarded like that, right? Like when you watch the Pistons, teams are fine with giving Jaden Ivey that shot on with like a late closeout. You know what I mean? They'll more pack the paint and just try and make things all bunched up. And then if they can get a late closeout, they'll get a late closeout. It's on Jaden to make it so that he's not just a solid catch and shoot 3-point shooter, but like a great catch and shoot 3-point shooter to be able to hinder teams when they do that. Assar on the court with where he is right now is such a negative on offense. It just is. And I love the guy in terms of like his mentality, unbelievable, like human being in kid, unbelievable defensive prospect. Like he will be an all defense guy long-term. I don't think you can have more than one non-floor spacer on the court in today's NBA. Just point blank. I do not believe that. I don't think that you can make that work and win at the highest levels in the NBA. So the answer to that question, I think, would be no. I don't think that you can flourish with both Assar and Duren unless one of those two guys really learns to shoot. And I would not project that at this point for either of those guys. I just wouldn't. Assar is an incredible worker. If I was going to bet on one of them, I guess I would bet on him. For Assar to reach his ceiling, he's going to have to at least like be able to hit spot threes. But yeah, I had Assar at like 9 or 10 on my board last year, so I was always a little bit lower, I guess.
Omari, look at your dad dropping the knowledge in the chat. I love it, Mr. Sankofa.
Oh man, my dad had the whole encyclopedia collection growing up. Yeah, my dad, he's very bookish. Hopefully we could get him on here one day. So Brennan actually took me to part of what I was going to ask next. Brennan asking, would the best version of Quentin Grimes be the best fit next to Cade? There's this debate. You're a big Jaden Ivey fan. Of course, Jaden right now is not really what you need shooting and defense-wise. Do you, like, especially at this juncture in the rebuild, I guess, do you see maybe a Quentin Grimes type being a safer path going forward, or do you still gamble on the upside Ivey brings there?
Why can't you play them together would be my question.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if Ivey improves at all, for Ivey to be the guy next to Cade, he has to improve on defense in some respect, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not breaking news, I guess. But there's a world where you could play 6'4" mega athlete, 6'6" with 7-foot wingspan, and then Quentin Grimes, who's the best defender out of all of them, at 6'5", 6'6", all on the court at once. So I don't think it's one or the other. To answer the question of like, is he a great fit? I think that he's an amazing fit next to Cade. Like, I think it really works having a guy that's like a legit 3-and-D guy who can hopefully knock down shots. That eluded him a bit this year in New York, and defend at the level that he does. He is a really good defender. I feel confident of that. Somebody like that is what needs to be on the court for the Pistons, and it's why I actually kind of was fine with their deadline. Like, I know that people crushed it, but like going to get Simone Fontecchio, who, very real shooter, can do some stuff with the ball in his hands, but is kind of like underrated a little bit on defense, just in terms of like knowing where he needs to be and being big and being able to like use his frame well to like plug up gaps and everything. And then Quentin Grimes, who's obviously like this 3-and-D prospect. Like, I think it makes a lot of sense across the board.
All right. We've talked a lot about this, and I'm sure people they can listen to you all day with this stuff, but let's move forward a little bit, Sam. First, with just the organization and the front office and your thoughts, right? In terms of what Troy Weaver...
You're just like trying to get me in trouble now.
What did I do? Sam, on your podcast, you asked me about Jalen Duren versus Cason Wallace. And you
complain every time.
No, I don't complain. I just refuse to answer the question. That's not complaining. That's just abstaining. Yeah. So
this tells me Sam's just sitting on some fire when it comes to this topic.
Hey, listen, I came prepared whenever he came on the Pistons Pulse. He knew I was going to get back at him.
Like, he knows how I feel about this. I would have removed Troy Weaver like 8 months ago.
So just answer this one. What Keaton asked, what's your thoughts on the hiring of a head of basketball operations and just this whole thing? Like, okay, there we go. Like, what are your thoughts on the idea behind this?
No, great. Like, I think it makes a lot of sense. It's absolutely what I would do. The problem for the Pistons is that, well, why are you adding another cook to the kitchen when it feels like already there are a lot of cooks in the kitchen? Yeah. Like, Artellum is there, Troy Weaver is there.
You mean the more cooks, not the better? That's not how it works. The more cooks in the kitchen, the better.
This is not the Comedy Central like too many cooks sketch. You can have too many of them. It's bad. You want like a centralized decision maker. And if I was like Tom Gores, I would have moved on from like, I would have like started fresh entirely. If Artellum like wants to be on the business side, totally good with that. Makes sense. I understand that, having Artellum in your front office probably creates circumstances where he will be involved in basketball, but I don't think that that's a negative. I don't think it has to be a negative across the board. Like, Pistons fans, might be disappointed about. I don't think Troy Weaver and this front office has proven that it can build a roster that in any way, shape, or form makes sense at this point. So to me, I wouldn't just add in another cook. I would remove the cooks that have been there and then bring in a cook that wants to build out his own front office.
No doubt. You bring up an interesting point. You have Arndt in the front office, and you'll probably have, some influence. I mean, he's Arndt, so of course, you're probably going to have some input as far as that. That they just have not come up with a good recipe, right? And that's part of it too. I think in every front office you have some level of collaboration, and but if you're stuck in the rut the Pistons are on now, clearly something went wrong somewhere. I guess when you look at the job Troy Weaver has done, and obviously for a 14-win team in year 4, a lot has to go wrong. But even I guess before this past season, was it the asset management that kind of rubbed you the wrong way? Was it?
Yeah, it was honestly part of it. Everybody talks about the picks, right? And how he's done a good job drafting. I was never as high on the picks, even, I guess. I loved the Cade pick, but you fell into Cade at number 1, right? You take Assar Thompson when I don't think in any way, shape, or form he's a fit with what you already have as your core. You take Jaden Ivey, who I would have taken for sure, and Jalen Duren, who I understand, but to me it's about look at the way Denver is built, look at the way Oklahoma City is built, look at the way Indiana is built. There's an overarching idea of what you're trying to do. There's intentionality that goes from president of basketball operations to ownership all the way down through your organization. I have never seen a level of intentionality to what they have built. And that is what is most immensely frustrating to me, is that there's never been okay, we're building around Cade. We're trying to put him in the best position to succeed. Let's surround him with shooters. Let's surround him with defenders. Let's surround him with things that make him better. Right. I've never seen them do that. And that's where I get frustrated with it.
You explained it to me and I thought it was perfect. You said it's been death by 1,000 cuts, because I was telling you Sam, it's tough because okay, the Bagley was an overpay, but it wasn't, you could write it off as, well, it's not detrimental. And yeah, they don't all fit, but they're good players. You know what I mean? It was just, you could explain every individual move off, but then as you looked at them in totality, it just never hits.
No obvious scapegoat move, right? Blake Griffin was the obvious reason why the last one failed. In this case, it's just a lot of compounding decisions that just compounded incorrectly, if you will.
What would you say their overarching goal is as an organization?
Are you for instance, who they want to be as a team?
So bring up, who do they want to be? What are they trying to build? Bring up the Corey Tufts.
The Corey Tufts. Yeah.
So compare and contrast the Magic's ascension with what the Pistons have done. So the Magic just evaluated really well. They nailed the Franz Wagner thing. They drilled the Nikola Vucevic deal, which was really important. I think that's the thing that started it off above all. They get Wendell Carter and Franz Wagner for 9 or 10 years, or no, they get them for more than that. It'll be almost 14 years of those guys for 2 years of Nikola Vucevic. If you would have told me I get 1 year of those guys for Nikola Vucevic, I would have done it. They evaluated well. For instance, they nailed Franz Wagner. And that's a pick that, for instance, I would have not gotten right. I probably would not have taken Franz Wagner where they did, but they knew what they were trying to do. And what they were trying to do was they wanted to build a big, long, rangy team that they felt like could cover ground on the court defensively. And then they lucked into the number 1 overall pick and got Paulo, right? But the whole goal has been, we're going to build this long rangy, defensive minded organization that can cover ground in today's NBA where spacing makes the court bigger than it's ever been. Right. So to me, when you compare and contrast the Magic's ascension, I look at this is an organization that, Jeff Weltman went in with an overarching plan. And while I don't agree with everything Jeff Weltman has done, I see the vision for what they've tried to do. Right. Oklahoma City is the best example of this. They've had like this overarching plan of, I always say it as, skill, processing, and like high IQ, high character. Right. Like those are the things they want to find with like high level positional length. You know what I mean? If you can find high level positional length and then those things in a player, you can work for the Thunder. As long as you, again, like have the high character that they look for at the end of the day. I'm trying to think of more of like a middling team that, maybe, it hasn't quite worked out yet, but like they're figuring it out. Right. So like the Nets are an example, like the other way, like the Nets, I have no idea what their overarching team building philosophy is.
The Pacers are a team that stands out to me, Sam, in terms of like, I know they're the 6th seed and they're about to knock off the Bucks, but we complained about their defense all year, but what the vision was. Like, what they're trying to do.
Yeah. Or Houston. Got way better on defense.
Yeah, like Houston's whole thing changed when they hired Ime, and it went from being like the front office had a vision and the coaching staff had a vision to seemingly the front office and coaching staff were aligned in creating like this tough defense first organization that signed Fred VanVleet, signed Dylan Brooks. We're going to go and we're going to actually make tangible improvements to the way Ime wants to play. There was a top-down idea. And that is actually like a somewhat similar situation to the Pistons where head coach comes in, big contract, a lot of power, right? Front office that is in a questionable situation entering the season, right? Like if this season would have gone bad for Houston, I have no doubt that like I'm not going to say they 100% would have been fired, but I think there's like a very real possibility that like the Rafael Stone led front office would have been in some big trouble had they ended up not being as successful as they were this year. But they were successful because they figured out top down what they wanted to be as an organization, and they've drilled draft picks. Like they have been unbelievable.
It's ridiculous.
Look, like, I mean,
we get cooked every time we rank them, Sam, because they have so many. We get killed every time we rank the Rockets' young core.
They're great. Like it's a great young core. They've done an incredible job of finding young players that make sense for them. Going to get Tari Eason and Cam Whitmore later on, nailing Amen Thompson at the top. I'm still a big fan about Jabari Smith, being able to make an impact across the board at the very least is like a scalable winning player who's like a super serious minded individual. Right. I'm a big fan of what they've built.
All right, Omari, we got to go to break. When we come back, let's get into the draft, because at the end of the day, Sam is awesome with the NBA, but there's nobody better when it comes to NBA draft stuff. And we had some Alex Sarr questions from the very, very start. So we'll ask about Sarr, the draft a little bit, and then we'll try to get through some of these other questions people have put in. We'll get to that right after this.
All right, we are here with segment 3, and we're going to dive into the draft. Big Dog Pistons, big supporter of ours.
Yes, he is.
Curious about Alex Sarr. And when you talk about sort of what you need in a modern big, Sarr checks a lot of those boxes. So I'll just open the floor to you. What do you like about Sarr? Yeah. And does he make sense for the Pistons? And why do you not see him being the consistent number 1 at this point, even though obviously a lot of teams and personnel are very high on him? Yeah,
so let's start with why he's really interesting, right? So when you guys see this dude in person, you're going to just say like 7'1" dudes are not supposed to move like this. It is different how coordinated, balanced, long this dude is. Like guys that look like this and are this elongated do not move like this. It is absurd. He is an unbelievable defensive prospect in terms of help defense, being able to switch out on the perimeter, and being like a real shot blocker, rim protector. He led the NBL in block rate this year among guys that played at least 200 minutes. Really, really impactful rim protector, as well as a guy that can play multiple defensive schemes in terms of ball screens. Just a very valuable guy. Now, why is he not the number one guy? 2 reasons. First, not a good rebounder. Right? Like it's a real factor within his game on the defensive end of the court where he'll get moved. Now, I think he will get better as he gets more functional strength in his legs and throughout his core and everything. But I do think that he would probably struggle in the NBA from a rebounding perspective early on in his career. And it will be interesting to see and track how successful he is as a rebounder long-term. Number 2, the offensive role is a ongoing question. Let's go with. In the NBL as a rim runner, he did not necessarily put like a crazy amount of like rim pressure out there in terms of I'm setting a screen, I'm making contact on this screen, and I'm going for a lob, right? Now, part of that is the condensed court in FIBA basketball. It's just a little bit tighter and everything's a little bit more difficult. But I also think that part of it is like the strength question a little bit with him still. He can get bumped and his momentum will slow down. In terms of the shooting, Steven asks, does he project to be a floor spacer? I would answer yes to this question. I think he will shoot. He needs to start to get his lower half a little bit more involved. The big thing throughout the year on why I think the numbers were a little bit more inconsistent were that he had a little bit too much like offhand interaction on the ball where like it would like touch his hand and there'd be like this goofy side spin on the ball. When I saw him later in the season, that had improved. He'd already made that adjustment. And on top of it, he also, I saw him work out in Santa Barbara in, what would that be, early April? Is that when I was in the United States, Bryce?
Yeah.
Mid-April?
Yeah.
Mid-April, I guess it would have been. And he had continued to like improve that and improve that and improve that. So I would say that I think he will shoot. And to be clear, he is the number 1 player on my board. I would take him at number 1.
For the Pistons?
For the Pistons, I would, because I would want the defender.
And then you just move Duren automatically. You figured it out with those two. You move Duren to the bench and play him behind Alex Sarr. What would be your thoughts on that?
I mean, I don't think that like Alex is going to be able to play the 5 and like anchor consistently in the NBA early on. Like the difference between him and Chet is that Chet is like a crazy like competitor and like is physical and like throws his body around with reckless abandon and is also always been an elite rebounder like across levels. Alex has never really been that, and I think it'd be hard to play him at the 5 because of that right now in the NBA. So like to me, I don't love any of these guys for the Pistons. Like that's kind of the breaking spot, but I would take Alex and hope that he can figure it out.
Okay.
As a shooter.
It's not Alex Sarr or the Pistons fall to 5 or whatever, or 2. Let's make it 2. Who are the best names? Because somebody brought up, Othello from Twitter says, Ricochet gang, like obviously, and on Zachary Ricochet, there's Matas, people are excited about Reed Shepherd. I see Pistons fans getting excited about even Dalton Connect if the Pistons fall to 5, just because they're so in love with the floor spacer. Give me the name or a few names that you're like, this actually makes the most sense to you.
I would not draft anybody that does not project as at least like an average shooter. So that kind of eliminates like Ron Holland, Cody Williams. It probably would eliminate Steph Castle as much as I like him.
Yep.
I think there's a little too much overlap between Topic and Cade.
Agreed.
I probably wouldn't have him there. So Sarr would be on the board. I mean, Reed, I haven't thought about Reed for the Pistons all that much yet. It just like doesn't seem like something that will happen just because like he doesn't fit the Troy Weaver archetype. So like we can probably just like remove him in some respect in terms of what they will do. I mean, Donovan Clingan is drafting Clingan, and that's a bad idea too. But like, yeah, no, I wouldn't do that. If I was the Pistons, I would probably have Sarr on my board. I would have Modest on my board, and I would have Riza Shea on my board. I think those are probably the top 3 guys.
I know this is always the name because I feel like a lot of people really like Cody Williams. So YouTube user says Cody doesn't project as a real shooter. Just quick thoughts on Cody Williams in terms of floor spacing in the Pistons.
He might shoot it at some point. We just don't have anywhere near the evidence. I think that people think when they look at like 41.5% from 3, he took probably 40 3-point attempts this year, right around that mark. I think he took I have 17 or 18 games or something of him on Synergy playing for Perry as a senior in high school. I think he took 10 pull-ups like that entire season somehow, which is like a crazy low number for somebody like that. This year, like there just wasn't a whole lot of pull-up efficiency in any way, shape, or form. I would like a more versatile, like potential shooter than what Cody Williams has displayed, but like I know that Cody Williams is like a really hard worker and there is some potential there for him to shoot. I wouldn't like totally rule it out long term. It would just be a hard sell for me to take him given where the Pistons are currently in terms of what they need.
Okay, real quick. So Koo brings up, sounds like the Pistons should trade the pick. Relaxing Sound says trade back for Dalton Connect. Just talk about, because I know this is something I've thought about as well. Like how common, like, is this a draft where trading back is even an option? Like, do you think that this is something that teams are going to be interested? Who's the player that maybe a team could get? Is it the Wizards trying to get to Alex Sarr, or is it somebody trying to get Rob Dillingham? You know, like we've talked about, I think we've mocked Dillingham to the Spurs before because it's like, hey, if there's somebody to insulate his defense, it's Victor Wembanyama. So who are a couple guys that's like, hey, maybe some team would want to go up to get this guy and the Pistons could actually trade back?
Yeah, I think it's going to be so team dependent this year. Like I have so many of these guys like basically in the same tier.
Yeah, that's what's tough, right?
So like it's really, really hard to pinpoint until we know like who has what pick kind of. Like if Washington ends up at like 3 or 4 and they really want Alex Sarr, like I can see a world where, you know, they try to move up for Alex Sarr, right? If, you know, a certain team, if San Antonio gets 1 and they end up with 7 as well, because they have that potential Raptors pick, like, could you see them like kind of move around the board a little bit to try and get what they want while adding assets for Victor and everything long term? Maybe. But like, here's the thing. I don't think teams will be all that enthusiastic about moving future picks for this year's picks. I do not think that these picks are as valuable as like a normal number 1 overall pick. Like I talked to like one executive who told me point blank, like I would not want the number 1 pick this year. And it's not one of those things where like, I don't want to make the decision. It's that the number 1 pick comes with a like 4-year, $58 million price tag, right? Something like that. 4 years, 60, whatever it's going to be. Victor, I think, is on like 4 years, 56, right? So with like the natural bump that goes every year, it'll be like something between 55 and 60 million. He was just like, look, that contract, if I was signing any one of these guys in free agency, I don't think I would want to pay that deal. So given the risk factors involved there, I just wouldn't want the pick. Right. So I think that like, if you end up at number 1, I wonder about how easy it will be to move the pick. I think it might be like a little bit easier to move. And I'm not saying they would get the same value. They wouldn't get the same value for 5 or 6. They can't end up at 6. They can only end up at 5, I guess. But like,
yeah,
I don't think they would get the same value for 5 that they would at number 1, but I think it'd be easier to move number 1 or to move number 5 than it would be to move number 1.
Just because the tiers don't break that hard and the contract's just so much different.
Yeah.
And the pressure of drafting 1 in this class where you feel like you're not drafting a guy who looks like a number 1 pick. Like you're
Yeah, and it's hard to explain to your fan base that, right? Like it's just hard to explain like this draft is bad and like don't expect like anybody great to come from this draft. Like no fan base wants to hear that. You know what I mean? Like I hate my job this year where I have to be like, oh, like, yeah, like you can't really expect, like a true franchise changer this year. Someone will come up and emerge, but like, it'd be hard to anticipate who that will be.
Well,
you know what I mean?
And it's coming off the Victor draft as well, which makes things even worse.
No doubt. The Pistons got 5 last year when they wanted 1, and now they'll probably get 1 when they want 5. So
yeah,
let's do some offseason free agent or trade, Omari.
Yeah, Sam. So you talked about last offseason, which, of course, was probably underwhelming then and a flop in hindsight. They come into the summer, NBA high, 60 million roughly in cap space. What path makes sense for a team like this, where I don't know if the answer is in free agency, where you have a class, you have Tobias Harris, but not necessarily guys who will turn the team around, or you also have, guys like potentially a Donovan Mitchell or a Devin Booker on these cap-addled teams who are going to have to make some moves. Is that probably the better outcome for the Pistons, is just waiting out the trade market and seeing what they can do as far as that? Or you have to see how it develops too, right? Because we're still in the middle of which teams,
like, you kind of have to be like prepared for a number of different potential options. Look, like I wouldn't want like Miles Bridges, for instance. Like my value system, like personally, like I wouldn't want to sign him. I don't know if NBA teams believe that, right? Like I don't think there are probably a few NBA teams that feel differently, at least, than I do on that, right? In terms of like other free agents to look at, I don't know. I mean, it's not a great class, right? Yeah. So like I would love Monk? So Malik Monk would be an interesting fit next to Cade. I actually really like that fit a lot next to Cade. I will say that, like, again, Malik has gotten better on defense, but you're probably not like taking a big leap there on defense. And you're probably gonna have to give Malik, in order to get him out of Sacramento, because Sacramento can offer him 480-ish, like in that ballpark. So to get him out of Sacramento, you probably have to pay him over $20 million a year, $20 to $25 million a year, you would think.
Yep.
Would I rather bet on Jaden Ivey, like bringing some of those things and being on the same age timeline as Cade Cunningham, as opposed to like Malik Monk? Probably, honestly. Especially given that you probably have to promise Malik like a starting spot, given that otherwise he'd probably just go elsewhere. Like he could go to Orlando, right? He could go to San Antonio, or wherever team has cap space, right, that might be interested in him. Or he could just return to Sacramento, where he's, totally revitalized his career and looks like this incredible player, and just make, $2 or $3 million less. And when you're making $20 million a year, I'm not sitting here saying that he should turn down an extra 20 million, but like be where you're happy too, like could be a potential consideration for him. Right. So yeah, it's a tricky one. He's a tricky one for me. Okay. I would say.
I want to ask this, and then Omari, if you have another one, we'll get Sam out on yours. Koo brings up
hold on real quick.
Okay.
The free agent I would look at if I was them is Hartenstein.
Okay. I was going to ask you about Hartenstein, and I forgot. Yeah.
I would probably do Hartenstein. So Isaiah, I think, can get up to like 476 or so. It's like a similar situation to the Malik Monk deal. I would probably be willing to give him slightly more. I'd probably be willing to go like 485 or so.
Yeah.
So and somewhere in that ballpark.
The defense, he's shown that floater over and over in this series. It's really good. Okay.
Yeah. Or 375. Big Dog Pistons brings up 375. That's an even better deal to me. Like, do that.
That's basically the Van Fleet mill, or would you do a player option, or would you just lock them in like completely?
Look, I don't know if you'd do a team option there. Like, I think he'd probably need 3 years guaranteed to do the Pistons. Be it like a 4-year deal with a team option, or 3. Like, I think he'd probably want 3 guaranteed.
Yeah.
All right, I want to ask you about Brandon Ingram because this is a name that's
No.
okay.
No.
So so I got asked this the other day as well, and my thing is I think this goes against everything we've talked about.
Correct.
BI wants to play with the ball in his hands. BI
Yes.
wants to operate in the mid range.
Yes.
BI isn't like if they were going to trade for a Pelican, I would rather it be like Trey Murphy or I mean, obviously Herb Jones.
They're not moving those
They're
guys.
not moving those guys.
The guy that you move is Brandon.
Yeah.
No, I think Brandon is a terrible fit with Detroit. I don't think it makes any sense, especially given that you probably have to give him like serious money in order
he has
to
one
do
more
it.
year, right?
Right. So your scenario here is either you give up assets for him and he leaves after a year, or you give him serious money. I would not want to do that. Okay. Because I just don't. Brandon is a guy that, can sort of pass, but it's all on Brandon's terms is the easiest way to put it. He is a pound the ball into the ground guy. The offense stops when he catches the ball, right? And it's similar to Cade, honestly. Like the offense stops when Cade catches the ball a lot of the time too. If you have two of those guys out there, it's going to look pretty ugly, I would think, in terms of like offensive flow and structure. I look like the sad thing is that I think like Pistons fans should be a little bit concerned about this, because if you're Monty Williams, you've proven that like you love the mid-range gunner type, right? Brandon is one of these guys, and Brandon's like a real talent. Like I think he's an excellent basketball player. Sure. It's just when you already have Cade Cunningham, who's going to stop the ball pretty consistently, I would not want another ball stopping kind of guy there. And again, like I understand that Brandon can pass. He definitely can pass and he can create shots, but like we're seeing in the playoffs, for instance, right? Where like, if you can just stay in front of him and make him take contested shots, the efficiency drops, right? Like it's hard to make him work.
I don't think he moves great off the ball as well. Like I don't think he has great relocation and those type of things where I don't think playing off of Cade fits BI super well.
I think it fits him. Like I think it fits Cade exceptionally poorly more t't anything. And on top of that, like Brandon is not a rim pressure guy. Like despite the fact that he's 6'9" with like a 7'4" wingspan and all this stuff, he's just never been that guy. He's a stop and survey and then get into a pull-up game and shoot, right? But I think that if I was the Pistons, I would want more of a potential rim pressure guy, like paint pressure guy next to Cade, which is why I'm intrigued by Ivy. And also why, like, I think on some level, Malik Monk does work. It does fit. And if you were just willing to say like, okay, our guard backcourt is going to be Cade Cunningham, Jaden Ivey, Malik Monk, Quentin Grimes, Marcus Assar. That's the five we're building around. Some of those guys can play down at the 3. Some of them can play the 2, like everything like that. Multiple guys that can play the 1, etc. I think that can work and that can be okay, but I want more rim pressure guys, I guess, than what they have right now. And especially compared to Brandon.
No doubt. Sam, I'll leave you with this. You are the next president of the Detroit Pistons organization. What direction, let's say they hired you before the draft, just sort of lightly overarching the offseason, who would you take with let's say it's a top 3 pick range? What route, I guess, what direction would you pick starting this offseason to sort of get this thing back on track?
I would survey the market to find out what the value is on Jaden Ivey, Jalen Duren, etc. Right? Like I would want to know what I could get for them on the market, basically. If it's something valuable, I would be willing to move them. If it's not, I would be willing to package all of those guys together for Assar if that comes available. That makes sense next to Cade Cunningham. Like that would make sense to me. I don't know who that would be necessarily off the top of my head, but I would survey and see where all of that sits. If I ended up having to make a pick, my board would be something like, I guess it would be Alex at 1, probably Modest at 2, Rizashay at 3, I guess. God, that feels gross.
What's so gross
God,
about
that
it?
feels bad. It's just like I don't. There's so much downside with all three of those guys.
Yeah.
Modest hasn't proven he can shoot.
Yeah, like I don't know what Sarr's offensive role is.
Yep.
Totally. Unless it's just like pure pick. He's like a pure pick and pop, like big, who can. But the other thing is like Sarr can dribble. I think Sarr will. The floor is lower the floor is higher, I guess, with Sarr. So I would take Sarr at 1. But like Modest and Risache, the floor is quite low. I can't take another shooter or another non-shooter next to Cade. Like I just can't do it. So that rules out Castle, Klingon. Like I have questions about Cody Williams. Yeah. Yep. Topich as well. Like it just kind of rules out certain guys. So I would really hope that Sarr falls to me, I guess, is what I would say at the draft, and would explore all avenues of that and would probably try to rent out my cap space. Look, here's the deal. Like Pistons fans, this is going to suck to hear. And I am so sorry about this. Like I don't enjoy saying this. I think they're farther away than what people think is what I would say. Like I would want to be more deliberate with how I build this roster. Like I would want to rent out cap space for picks. I would want to like, I would be willing to like take the Ben Simmons deal if they were willing to like give me a little bit of money or give me like pick capital for it. Right. Or if they were willing to give me an asset for it. I'd be willing to take like certain deals that are shorter term in order to try and build my asset base, which by the way, the Pistons are still out one future first round pick potentially.
We are
I have to remind fans of that so much. Like they don't have a pick till 2028 or 29.
Can you talk about why you wouldn't do that with Andrew Wiggins real quick though?
Yeah.
It's too long of a contract. I would honestly I would consider Wiggins depending on what the Warriors were adding on to it.
Moody?
I actually like the more I think about it, like if they were willing to add on like Moses Moody, I would really consider that. And I would want to know, like I would do due diligence on like what's going on with Wiggins and try to figure it out. I would want to rent out my cap space and like build longer term. But I don't know if the Pistons want, like, it doesn't seem like ownership and the people that are in charge, like, want that. And I understand that they've been bad for so long that like, I identify with that and I get it. And I don't think that like, I get it, I guess is what I would say. It's just that I would be more deliberate, I think, than what the Pistons will be this summer. And I would not plan on winning next year, I think is what I would say.
Oh, such a good pod. And then we end on such a downer.
All right,
I know, like that's the thing. Like he asked the question in terms of what I would do. And it's just like, I just think that you only probably have 5 to 6 years left with Cade Cunningham.
Mm-hmm.
And I would want to restart this thing almost entirely to have a chance to be good by the time like Cade is good. Like really, really good. And but like Cade's already good. I think Cade like might make the All-Star game this coming year. If they are anything resembling competent, I would say Cade will be an All-Star this year. But by good, I mean like top 15 guy in the league. And I think that he will be at some point like a top 15 guy in the league. So like by the time he's that, I would want to have a chance to contend. And spending a bunch of money in free agency, spending like, having these kids that, just can't really shoot around him and everything. Like I would want to build an entirely different way around Cade, I guess. And I would want to try and get involved in like the Ace Bailey Cooper Flag draft. And I would want to try and rent out cap space and get more assets and like make it so that I have a shot.
All right, Sam, anybody who doesn't know, let them know where you're at, what you're doing, where they can find you and all your amazing works.
Go to The Athletic, subscribe over there, keep me employed. I'm doing draft guide right now. Bryce, how many words have I written on the draft guide? Do you know?
You said some crazy number. It was like midnight when we finished last night, Sam. When we get to the end, I stopped listening to you.
It's got to be like around 100K, right?
So far I've written like 75,000.
I thought it was almost 100.
Yeah, and I'm through I think 25 of the top 28 guys. So that'll be up at The Athletic earlier than what it is normally. Like typically we end up doing that like draft week is when that gets released, and that won't happen this year. This year it'll be out way earlier, which is something we're really excited about. I've probably got like 2 more weeks of like hard work on it where I can like really focus in and be ready to go on that. We're going to do, Bryce is over at the Game Theory podcast with me. Bryce is the best. I'm so lucky to get to work with him. So like, please go support Bryce. You guys know how good he is, listening to him every day. We'll have some prospect interviews up there as well. I'm really excited to, I've recorded a couple of them already. It's funny. I've recorded with Alex Sarr already, just like an unbelievable, like really nice kid. Bobby Clintman's like the super like engaging, fun personality that I think you guys will really enjoy. So we're doing like, I don't know if you guys remember like the old Mike Schmitz videos, but we're just picking plays and we're diving into tape with them. Right. And letting them kind of explain their own game in a really fun way and talk about what I like about them and everything. So go to the YouTube channel, subscribe to the YouTube channel. That'll be up at some point. Go subscribe to the podcast where you'll be able to hear Bryce 3 times a week during the playoffs. And 2 times a week, at least during the season.
Support Sam over at The Athletic. He's by far probably the most thorough draft analyst out there. 75,000 words that he's not done. That's insane. Also listen to Sam and Bryce over at Game Theory, 2 of the purest basketball purists I certainly know. It's like we have shared custody of Bryce. Like I don't know how that works legally, but of course.
He's our 38-year-old or whatever he is. I think you're 38, right?
37.
37.
Matter at this point.
Yeah, our 37-year-old child that we just try and share as much as we can.
Yeah.
Until some team hires him and I continue to grow my game theory coaching tree.
I didn't happen at some point.
I didn't realize the pressure I was under whenever I partake on joining Sam's podcast. Everybody's like, "Hey, do you know so-and-so got hired by this team and so-and-so got
3
hired
in a row, baby."
And I'm like, okay, well, I guess there's some pressure that goes along with it.
Went from Cole, who is now pretty high up in the Houston front office, to Matt Penny, who works at WME and does great work with college coaches and everything, to Adam, who got signed by the Pistons. So just waiting for Bryce to decide what he wants to do.
By the Sixers.
Yeah. Sixers, I said. What did I say?
You said the Pistons.
Yeah, did not get signed by the Pistons. That would have been a good hire by the Pistons.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's news to me.
That would have been the best hire. That'd been the best move they've made over the last 12 months. But.
Got signed by the Sixers, which is good.
Yeah. All right, close it out here, Omari.
No doubt. Sam, again, thank you so much. And big thanks, as always, to our audio producer, Robin Chan, our editor-in-chief, Nicole Avery Nichols, our executive producer, Anjanette Delgado, and our sports editor, Kirkland Crawford. And big thanks to Wes, who, assuming his fridge issues are fixed, will rejoin us next week. And we will talk to you all soon.